Thank you all for being here today. We're grateful that you take some time out and let us express our concern over this administration and our desire to hold them accountable and the efforts that we are making to hold them accountable. I think the one thing that we need to make clear is the House Freedom Caucus believes in action. And we're really concerned about the direction of this country. Under this administration, there's so much that has gone wrong. But moreover, as we've watched the disastrous evacuation of our troops from Afghanistan, as we've watched Americans left behind in Afghanistan, as we've watched literally billions of dollars worth of materiel be left behind in Afghanistan. I think we all saw the image yesterday of the Taliban flying an American helicopter, hanging someone they believe to be a traitor to the Taliban cause. When we see that type of thing, we can't help but get very agitated and riled. Right now in Kabul, there are only 4 embassies left, none of them from the West. You've got the Pakistan, Iran, Chinese, and Russian embassy left. That's what you have. You have from April 30th to June 30th of this year, Americans funded 174 Humvees for the Afghan forces. Those have been unaccounted for and left behind. We know planes have been actually flown out of Afghanistan to other jurisdictions. And we have the State Department saying basically the fact that we left Americans behind, I believe, I don't want to misquote, but I think I'll paraphrase, they said this happens all the time. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And we are going to continue to fight this thing through and raise accountability. So the Freedom Caucus, many of our members, it's generally a general consensus. We have, besides the impeachment effort of Homeland Secretary Mayorkas, we've engaged now in an impeachment effort of Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. We believe that he has got culpability for much of the travesty that has gone on here. We've also called for resignation of various leaders. We're joined, for instance, in our call for resignations of Secretary Austin and General Milley by 90 retired generals. We also call upon the person who said the buck stops here, who said more than 20 times, we will not leave any American behind. The person who basically orchestrated the July 2nd evacuation of Bagram without telling Afghanis. We call upon, most somberly, the resignation of this President Joe Biden. With that, I'm going to the main sponsor, original sponsor of the Blinken impeachment resolution, Andy Harris. I'm going to go to him, followed by Clay Higgins, the architect and drafter of the resolutions for resignation. So with that, Andy Harris.
Thank you very much. Now that the Afghanistan withdrawal debacle is over, we have to be sure nothing like this will ever happen again. So last Friday, Ralph Norman from South Carolina and I filed a resolution including impeachment articles for Secretary Blinken. Secretary Blinken has utterly failed in his duties as Secretary of State, as defined by the roles and duties of the position in statute. They're clearly written in Title 22 of the U.S. Code. For instance, the Secretary of State shall develop and implement policies and programs to provide for the security of the United States government operations of a diplomatic nature. Clearly wasn't done in Afghanistan, as we have abandoned our embassy. He's tasked with security responsibilities, including, quote, emergency planning. Clearly, emergency planning wasn't done. He's tasked with counterterrorism planning and coordination, including emergency action planning and threat analysis programs. Clearly not done in Afghanistan. And finally, the Secretary of State is responsible for overseas evacuations. Many people don't realize this is not the Department of Defense, it's the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State, the code says, shall develop and implement policies and programs to provide for the safe and efficient evacuation of United States government personnel, dependents, and private United States citizens when their lives are endangered. Such policies shall include measures to identify high-risk areas where evacuation may be necessary. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Afghanistan was one of those areas where evacuation was necessary. And even last week, we were told by the Secretary that no American who wants to leave will be left behind, and yet we know now that over 100 Americans who wanted to leave were left behind. This is the responsibility of the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State utterly failed in his duties to develop and implement an effective, safe, and efficient evacuation plan, and he must be held accountable. He has to be held accountable because around the world, Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran at this moment imminently threaten our allies. And we need to be certain that something like Afghanistan doesn't happen to one of our other allies. We need new, competent leadership at the State Department, and it starts with the resignation or impeachment of the Secretary. I now yield to Mr. Higgins.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.